Opening week of football, for the most part at least, is officially in the history books. Now that the dust is settled, it's pretty clear who benefited from opening week and who most certainly did not and face major question marks heading into week 2. But we have to ask ourselves, who are the true standouts from week 1? Well, today, I'm going to give you who, in my opinion, are the biggest winners and losers of week 1. And fair warning, there's a lot more losers than winners on this thing. But let's start this off positively. Winner number 1 of week 1 is the Chiefs. Chiefs fans really can't ask for a better start than this. It was a hell of a lot cleaner compared to last year's opener against Detroit. There were no Super Bowl hangovers to be found on that team. They got a big win over one of their biggest obstacles if they want to pull off a three-peat. The defense, for the most part, still kinda held up, and they had receivers who could actually catch the football. Shout out to Kadarius Toney. The offense looked so much more lively than honestly most of all of last year, with both Rashee Rice and newcomer Xavier Worthy making some huge plays for this team. And what makes you probably feel the best about this scenario, if you're a Chiefs fan, not just here in the present, but here in the future, is the fact that a lot of their success came without Travis Kelce doing much of anything. In a life post-Travis Kelce retirement, it seems like you have the core in place to still be successful with your pass game and to give Mahomes good weapons. If they keep going this way, defenses are going to have to adjust and game plan more for these receivers. And when that happens, Kelce's going to have one of his classic 100-yard performances. It's only a matter of time. This Chiefs offense is terrifying, and if I was the rest of the NFL, I'd be pretty scared. For loser number 1 of the week, we've got to go with the Carolina Panthers. A 47-10 loss at the hands of the Saints is a statement way to start your year, and not in a good way. I mean, this team is so bad that this game was already over by the end of the first quarter, and by halftime already being down 27. Jesus Christ, man. I mean, you let Derek Carr in the year 2024 sling the ball against you like it was nothing. That defense looks like Swiss cheese. And don't even get me started on the offense. It somehow might be even worse than what I saw last year. Bryce Young still can't throw, the O-line still can't block, and this team just might be on their way to an 0-17 season, and I just feel so bad for any Panthers fan that has to endure what they're about to watch, because realistically, even though I didn't think it was possible, things can still get much, much worse. You know what? I'm feeling charitable. How about another loser of the day? Loser number 2, the Cleveland Browns. In front of their home fans, they got absolutely smoked by the Cowboys. The Texans scammed the Browns so hard with that Deshaun Watson trade, it's not even funny. This is highway robbery at this point. We're now in what, year 3 since he was traded to that team? The second year with him being the starter right from week 1, and he has not even come close to his previous form on the Texans yet. He did not throw an accurate ball in that Dallas game. The pressure came at him a lot, but the decisions weren't great. He threw 2 picks, and he continues to look like an absolute bum who doesn't even care. It's clear that the Browns know what they have with this guy. Deshaun is never going to be what he was ever again, and now they're going to have to suffer the consequences because they're locked into that contract. I mean, the Cowboys didn't even have to do anything to win this game. The Browns are never going to compete at this rate, and it truly is a tragedy. Winner number 2? The Philadelphia Eagles. The game against Green Bay kind of got off to a slow start, but generally, you can't ask for a better week 1 than this if you're a Philly fan. A big win over one of the better teams in the NFC, and it came while making use of Saquon Barkley, who was supposed to be a very important signing for this team during the offseason. They invested a lot of money into this guy, and he went out there and put on a show with 3 freaking touchdowns. This is what happens when you give this guy actual help. This is a great sign of things to come if he can stay healthy. It adds another element to this Eagles offense. And speaking of that offense, Jalen Hurts looked good out there. They seemed a lot less predictable with their play calling. They called a lot of interesting stuff that we didn't see last year. That coordinator change is certainly paying off. And it was just a good win for this team to put them back on track. I'm maybe a little worried about the defense. There is certainly some tackling and coverage issues, but one step at a time. Keeping it in the NFC East, my next next big loser is the Giants. Coming into this matchup, the Vikings were almost certainly the better team on paper, with less questions about their roster in general. But it should have at least been a little closer than this. The Vikings are a decent team, but they're not out of this world, and somehow you lost 28-6 to them. Not even a single touchdown was scored in this game. It's just unacceptable, man. Honestly, you could make an entire list of losers for a video just with the Giants. But let's focus in on the biggest aspects of why this game was a disaster. First and foremost, to the surprise of absolutely nobody, Daniel Jones. I mentioned Deshaun Watson and how he's a scam artist, but Daniel Jones genuinely may have pulled off the greatest heist of the century. How do you pay $40 million a year to a guy who has one read down the field every single play and is so easily predictable for NFL defenses? They just have to read his eyes, and then he throws stupid interceptions, like we saw at the line of scrimmage and in the red zone as well. And even when people were open, he was misfiring so badly with all these balls going into the dirt. That man's confidence is completely and utterly gone. This guy has no awareness whatsoever, and it's to the point where since he has signed that contract, he has thrown more pick sixes than he has touchdowns. He has thrown touchdowns more to the enemy team than he has his own wide receivers in the last 8 games. How does this guy get away with still being the starter? It boggles my mind, and Giants fans now have to suffer the consequences because nobody over at that organization has any idea what they're doing. And you know what the crazy part is? That's not even the only reason they're huge losers, because their defense, oh boy, it is terrible. They let Sam Darnold, a literal NFL journeyman, do whatever he wanted to. A damn near perfect game from him where he looked cool, calm, and collected. How often in his career has that ever been the case for this guy? There was no pressure being applied to this guy after the first drive. For all that emphasis being put on the new and improved D-line with Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, they didn't do crap in this game. You made this big trade happen and you gave Brian Burns all that money, and he did nothing in this game. Where was he? Where was my new acquisition? I didn't see him. Maybe he forgot to show up to the stadium. And how about Kayvon Thibodeau, who had exactly 0 tackles in this game and got benched by halftime? Dear God, what a clown fiesta. This is going to be a long season for the Giants, and somehow, someway, they're still going to find a way to mess up that tank as they always do. Okay, rant's done, back to some positivity. My next big winner of week 1 is the LA Chargers. It was a battle against their divisional rival in the Raiders, but slowly but surely, they asserted their will, and they showed exactly what the Harbaugh mentality was, with that power run game, with J.K. Dobbins having a great game, coming back from injury, putting up some scores, getting well over 100 yards, an excellent matchup, and a way to show exactly what this Chargers offense is going to be like this year. You got some exciting highlights from Ladd McConkey, and how about Joe Alt, who didn't allow a single pressure when going 1v1 against Max Crosby, one of the best edge rushers in the league. It was imperative for the Chargers to get off on the right foot, and they accomplished that big time. They needed a win with their new head coach Jim Harbaugh, and they got it. They went out there and they outplayed the Raiders in a gritty matchup. That's the stuff you want to see from the Chargers this year. Even if they are ultimately a crazy competitor, they need to show some kind of improvement and clear-cut direction, and right now they can actually believe in themselves with the new identity that they established. My next major loser of NFL Week 1 is unfortunately the Packers. Not necessarily because they played a terrible game against the Eagles. I mean, there were some miscues and some big-time missed opportunities, but they're more so losers because Jordan Love went down with that MCL injury, and he's going to miss at least a couple of weeks bare minimum. In worst case scenario, from the looks of the initial timetable, it could be 6 weeks or maybe even more. And if that happens, the Packers season genuinely might already be over. The Packers don't exactly have the greatest backup plan, you know? If Love misses multiple weeks, there's a good chance the Packers lose most, if not all, of those matches he's not a part of. And if they dig themselves too big of a hole early on, it's not going to be easy to get themselves out of it, especially when they play in a pretty competitive division and in a conference where it is definitely not easy to make the playoffs. If Jordan Love gets the worst case scenario, this season's going to be quite the disappointment for Packers fans. For the next big loser of the video, we're going with the Atlanta Falcons. There's still a lot of time to turn it around. Week 1 can always be a really crazy one, but I was not happy with what I saw. They only put up 10 measly points. That Steelers defense is nothing to scoff at, but you signed Kirk Cousins to avoid situations like this, to avoid having to witness what Desmond Ridder and what Taylor Heineke was giving you. Kirk is supposed to save you. That offense is supposed to look so high-powered, but the rust needed to be shaken off. He did not have a great day in the office. I'm happy that Kyle Pitts got a touchdown, but that's about the only positive to take away from this Atlanta matchup. The Steelers had his number all day, and as a result, they had to sit and watch as they lost through death by field goal to such a mediocre Steelers offense. It's just a sad way to lose. This game felt so winnable, and it's just not the way you want to start a season when this was supposed to be the most exciting one in recent memory. For my next big winner of the video, I'm going with the Houston Texans. It was a bit of a close game against the Colts, a little too close for comfort, I'd like to add, but they showed us exactly what their potential looks like with the amount of points they're putting up on the board, while also making good use of their new offseason acquisitions. That's the big thing in this all. Not only that CJ Stroud still looks like a beast, but that they were able to get Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs involved with this team to make this offense all the more terrifying. Joe Mixon had like over 130 yards on the ground. It was a crazy day from him. Stephon Diggs gets 2 touchdowns. Tank Dell and Nico Collins still made some plays as well. This offense, when firing at all cylinders, is going to be a problem, and Week 1 is a prime example of why everybody and their mother currently fears the Texans. Before unveiling my final winner of the video, just a couple of honorable mentions that didn't quite make the cut. First and foremost, Dak Prescott. Not because he had a crazy day on the Cowboys, but because he got paid handsomely and is now the highest paid player in NFL history. Congrats to Dak for getting the bag and for showing that they're going to need him if they want to be competitive. And also, I'd like to throw in the Saints. They had such a big win, and that was important for their confidence as a team. But because it's only the Panthers, obviously, you can't put too much stock into it. My final big winner of the video that made my list, though, in my top 5, is the Patriots. Obviously, the Pats are trying to build this thing up from the ground and find what they have, and it's probably in their best interest to tank and draft more talented players. But Jerod Mayo in his first game getting a win is a feel-good story, and it shows to him and the organization that his players like playing for him, and that he definitely could be the right move for the future of this franchise. The Bengals love to get off to those slow starts, but they're still the Bengals at the end of the day. They're one of the better teams in the AFC. Joe Burrow's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and you did a pretty good job of containing him in this one. Definitely not a pretty game, but this was very easily the biggest upset of the week, at least so far, and I think for that, it's worth including the Pats on this list. Now for the final losers of the video. First up, the Tennessee Titans. Expectations were pretty low for them for me in Week 1, and somehow they managed to be even worse than I expected. And it's sad too, because they made Caleb Williams' life a nightmare with this game. They contained that Bears offense perfectly. The dude didn't even throw for 100 yards. The Bears had 0 offensive touchdowns, and somehow they lost. A game like this, under these circumstances, should be won 100 times out of 100 without question. It takes a special kind of loser to throw away a game like this, and they're worth congratulating for that. For loser number 7, the Bengals. Classic slow start Bengals. They managed to do it again. This team has played like garbage in opening week for like 3 consecutive years, and this time should have been the easiest matchup of all against a Pats team with no clear direction whatsoever that is at the very beginning of their rebuild with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. It boggles my mind that the Bengals failed to win this game. They couldn't even put up more than 10 lousy points. It didn't take much more than that. You just needed 2 touchdowns to win this game, essentially, plus the field goal you had. The Patriots offense didn't do anything. Jacoby Brissett threw for 120 yards on the day, and you still couldn't win? Crazy stuff. Hopefully the Bengals can shake it off in Week 2, but man, it is disappointing to start a year like this. And for my final loser of the video, I guess maybe more of an honorable mention, because they didn't play a bad game at all against the Chiefs, would be the Baltimore Ravens, and I have them as a loser for 2 reasons. One, is they lost because of a toe. That is a tragic way to lose a game, and we got robbed of a potential overtime, or I guess the Ravens going for 2 and maybe winning that game altogether. But also, Lamar Jackson still can't be clutch when it matters. There are some throws that got away from him. I know the pressure was on that whole game. He was running for his life. But when he did have some time, there were some open receivers that he was just completely clueless about, like with Zay Flowers in the end zone, like one play before that Isaiah Likely touchdown that got called back. The Ravens are so close to being a true Super Bowl threat. They have the talent around them, but Lamar keeps putting a lot of these opportunities to waste. He's got to make the most of it. Lamar needs to play better in the clutch, otherwise the Ravens will never be taken seriously. I suppose we'll have to wait and see when the next opportunity presents itself, but that basically does it for my biggest winners and losers of the first week of 2024. Let me know what you think down in the comments below and who you think are the biggest winners and losers that I may have missed out on. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe for more NFL content.